do a quick run through of the combat system in Twilight 2000 in a very simple scenario. We're going to have Sergeant Rain, who will be using the stats for a Special Forces trooper. He's in the farmhouse. He's using the window as cover, so the only part of him visible are his arms and his head. And we have 3 Marauders. 2 of the Marauders have got steel helmets on, the third's wearing a cap, so they've got no armour. Sergeant Rain has got a Kevlar jacket on. He's also carrying an M16A2 with 3 magazines of 30 rounds each. The Marauders are all carrying AKMs with 2 magazines of 30 rounds. For these, I'm going to use the NPC system just to quickly speed things up during the game. So I've drawn the initiative cards, and you act in initiative order. So Sergeant Rain, with the lowest card of a 3, gets to act first. So he gets 2 actions, a fast and a slow action. So he's going to use the fast action to aim, and then the slow action to fire. So he's going to aim at the central figure, the one that looks like the leader, and he's got a skill base of B and an attribute of A, which means to roll to hit he would be using a 12-sided, oops, that was clever, and a 10-sided dice. However, because he's at more than the short range, which is 6, he's at 7, that gets reduced by 1. So we're at medium range, so that reduced the lowest dice by 1. And he's also got the option to fire ammunition dice. I'll explain how they work in a minute. So we'll use, I think, 2 ammunition dice. So he gets to roll to hit, and every hit or every roll of 6 or more is a hit, and a 10 or more is 2 hits. So let's see what happens. So he's fired. We've got 1 hit, and we've got a single 1. That's not enough for a mishap because he's rolling 2 dice. So he's used 4 rounds of ammunition, and he's got 1 hit. Now, the weapon, in fact, we better see where it hits first, because if I roll the hit location of the head, then the body armour will reduce it. So 6 is the head. It has hit the head. So the body armour has now got, the helmet's now got a hole in it. Now, the weapon initially was doing a base damage of 2. There's an armour factor of 1, and the armour penetration of the M16 is 0, so it makes no difference. So that lowers the damage to 1. So if that had been a PC, they would have taken 1 hit point of damage. Because I'm using the quick play system for the NPCs, what does happen is they're automatically suppressed. So he goes prone, and he loses his next action. So that's nice and straightforward. So Sergeant Rain has so far suppressed 1 of the Marauders. So that's their turn done. We move on to the next one, which is the activation for the NPC, and what he's going to do is reactivate, because he's now removing the pin, but that's his action gone for the turn. So we now go on to the next one, which is the female Marauder here. So she's got a skill of 8 and an attribute of 8, but the AK firing at a range of more than 5, between 5 and 10, that's 1 range band away, so that drops to a D6. Now, there's no modifier for the target being in cover, because that's accounted for with having to get through the armour. So she's going to fire at maximum rate and use 4 ammunition dice. So let's roll to hit, see what happens. Okay, so no hits, and used 12 rounds of ammunition. So that really didn't achieve a lot. And she's now still stood in the open, just blatting fire away, very much like the footage you'd see of the of militias in somewhere like Somalia, or in my area, Lebanon, where they would run into the middle of the street and fire an entire magazine. She's doing something pretty similar. Okay, so we've now got the Marauder at this end. Now he's going to go a bit more tactical. he can move 2 squares or 2 hexes automatically, and what you can then do is try and roll to move further, and it uses agility, and they've got a rating of C, so it's a D8. He's got no mobility skill listed, so we get to roll to see if he can move any further, and a 3 he fails, so he stops having moved the 20 meters, and that's the end of the first round. So we're into the second round. Sergeant Rain is still going to go first. There is an option in the rules where you can swap cards between people as actions. I'm not going to bother using that here. So Sergeant Rain is going to fire now at the Marauder who's firing at him. So again, we start with the 12 and the 10. Immediately drop 1 because of the range, and he's going to fire with another 2 dice. So let's see what happens. So this time we've got 2 hits, and we've used 4 rounds of ammunition. High skill means you can actually fire far less ammo than someone with low skill. Low skill, you're basically trying to put as much lead towards the target as possible, whereas this is more about accurate placement. So because he's now got 2 hits instead of 1, what happens is it increases the damage by 1. So we're on a base damage of 2. Because we've got an extra hit, that increases by 1 to 3 points of damage. Now the M16 has got a critical rating of 3, so they've actually got a critical hit. Now a critical hit in the rules against an NPC is an instant kill. But what I'll do is just very quickly work out what would have happened if it had been a PC. So the first thing we would do is roll the hit location, which is a 2. They've been hit in the torso. So let's refer to the critical hit chart, and we roll a 10-sided dice for a critical hit, and it's a 5. So a 5 in the torso, they've actually ruptured the kidney, which is potentially lethal. After a shift, which is 5 to 10 hours, they would have to roll to see if they survived. And any time they make any mobility roll, they take 1 dice, so 1 damage. So that would have been quite effective, but because it's an NPC, it's actually irrelevant. They're actually dead. So that was quite effective fire from Sergeant Rain. 8 rounds, and he's suppressed 1 and killed 1. So next action, we've got our leader figure there. He's going to return fire again. So he's now using the 2 8-sided dice, but because of the range, drops to a 6-sided. He's going to fire. He's got a maximum rate of fire of 4. He's actually going to fire using 3 ammunition dice. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we've got take those 2 out because they didn't achieve anything. So that's 9 ammunition used. I'll make a note of that first before I go any further. And we've got 1 hit, but we've also got 2 1s. So we've got the weapon jamming after it fires. So let's deal with the hit first. So let's see where he's hit. So what have we got? We've got a 1, which is the legs. Now they're protected by the building, which has got an armor value of 2. The AK has got a damage of 2 and an armor penetration of 0, so it won't modify the damage. So the armor knocks 2 down, knocks it down to a 0. Basically the wall has just stopped the bullet. But we've also got the potential jam. So the weapon class now drops 1 to B using the new roll, which is 10-sided dice for a B. Let's see what happens to the weapon, and we've got 2 successes, so the weapon hasn't broken, so it is still usable, so it's not as bad as it could have been. So that's his action. Our guy here is going to do exactly the same as he's done, and he's going to run. Now he's got the option of moving through the light bush there, but he's going to try and move around the side, so there'll now be no modifier for his mobility. He's got a 5, which isn't enough to succeed again. So that's the end of that round. So we're into the third round now. Sergeant Rain to act first. So he's going to fire again. Now again he starts with the 10 and the 12. However, that's down to an 8 already because of the range, but because the target's prone, that drops another 2, so it drops to a 6 and then it vanishes. So he's only going to fire 2 ammunition dice with it. So let's see what happens this time. So we've got a 1 on the hit dice and 6 on the ammunition dice, so there's no hits. He's used 6 rounds of ammunition and not achieved anything. But because he's only rolling 1 dice to hit, that now becomes a potential stoppage. So his weapon degrades to class B, and let's see if it is a problem. So 2 10-sided dice for the new reliability category, and his weapon has now jammed. So he's now got a bit of a problem. Once you've got a jammed weapon, then he has to try and clear it, which is a slow action using technical skill, and if it fails, the weapon breaks. Of course, the Marauders don't know this, so they're going to carry on with what they were doing. He's going to carry on firing, so we're on the 2 8-sided dice, dropped by 1 category because of the range to the 8 and the 6, and he's going to put 3 dice worth of ammunition. So let's see what happens. Oh, this is looking quite effective. We've actually got 3 hits and only 1 potential jam, so then they're going to come out of it, but he has used 15 rounds of ammunition, so he's down to 6 rounds left in the magazine. Now let's see where Sergeant Rain has been hit, because this is quite important. He's been hit 2, which is the torso, which is protected by the building. The good news as well is he's also wearing his Kevlar jacket over the torso, so he's effectively got an armour value of 3. Now when we look at it, the AK has got the damage of 2 increased by 2, so it's talking 4 points of damage. However, the first thing we're going to do is get through the building, which is 2, and then another 1 to penetrate the flak jacket. So Sergeant Rain has now taken a point of damage. He's now dropped from 6 to 5. So he's also got to now make a coolness under fire check. Now his coolness under fire rating is a 10-sided dice. Because he's on his own, there's no morale rating, so he has to roll a success on this dice, and he gets a 10, which is 2 successes. He's fine, he's going to carry on fighting. So we come to our Marauder on the flank, who's going to carry on through. So he does his 2 square movement, or 2 hex movement, and tries to see if he can get further, and he's got an 8, so he's succeeded, so he's got that extra square there, or hex there. So he's getting to the point where he can start now creeping through the trees. So we start the next turn, and Sergeant Rain has now got to try and fix his weapon, and his rating for that is a 10-sided and an 8-sided, so he needs at least 1 success, and he's got 3 successes, so his weapon is now cleared. That was his slow action. He's got his fast action left. Now fast action, he could reload, or try and reload. He's still got 16 rounds in the magazine. He could aim, he could seek cover, he could run, cross a barrier, get up, or move through a doorway. What he's going to do is going to try and reload, which is a mobility roll, and if he succeeds, then he does it. If he fails, it becomes a slow action, and because he hasn't got a slow action left, he would lose it. So he loses nothing for trying. So for this one, he's on the 12-sided for the attribute, doesn't have a skill, so he's only rolling 1 dice. Let's see what we get. And a 12, he's got 2 successes, so he is now on his next magazine of ammunition. And that was his actions. The Marauder still got 6 rounds left in his magazine, so he's going to carry on firing. So he's still on the 6 and the 8, and he uses 2 ammunition dice. So let's see what happens. Okay, so he uses 5 rounds of ammunition, and he's got no hits, so there's no effect from that. That wasn't particularly effective. So the Marauder uses his 2 hex movement, and he's going to try and push it to go an extra hex. So 8-sided dice, and he's going to stay into the open, so there's no modifiers. He fails, so he stays where he is. So next round then, Sergeant Rain now with a full magazine is going to start firing. So again we start with the 10 and the 12, dropped by 1 because of the range and dropped by 2 because of the cover. So he's going to use 2 dice for ammunition, and let's see what we get. So we've used 8 rounds of ammunition, which is knocking him down to 22 in the magazine, and he's got 1 hit. So 1 hit on an NPC is enough to suppress. So that's all he's achieved. The NPC uses their action to recover, and that leaves the person over here. So he's going to use his 2 actions as a fast action to move to there. So he's now peeking around the corner. Now, because he hasn't used a fast action to aim, he's going to be reduced on his firing, but he decides he's basically going to put every round he can at Sergeant Rain. So he's now at short range, so there's now no modifier for that. So he's starting on 2 8-sided. Now he's not aimed, so that reduces it by 2, so that's to the 6 and then nothing. And the AK has got a maximum rate of fire of 4, so he's going to fire all this. Let's see what happens. Okay, so we've got 10 rounds of ammunition being used up. He's got 1 hit, but he's also got a potential stoppage. So we'll deal with the hit first. Okay, that hits 2. Hits the torso, and we know that the 2 damage and the 2 defense value wall plus the flak jacket, there's no damage. So we've now got to look at the stoppage. So we're looking at, for this one, the weapon has dropped from 12s to 10s because it's the new rating that's used. Do we get a stoppage? No, we've got a success. So he hasn't actually got a malfunction of the weapon. He's just not had anything bad happen. So that's the end of the round. So Sergeant Rain's now got this enemy appearing at point blank range. So he's going to switch fire. So we're on the 10 and the 12, but this time there's no deductions because the range is short. And he's going to fire at the maximum rate of fire of 3 ammunition dice. So let's see what we get. Okay, so we've got 1 potential stoppage, so that's no effect. He's used 9 rounds of ammunition, dropping him down to 13, and we've got 2 hits. So where has he actually hit the target? He's hit them 3 in the torso. The torso's behind the building. So he's now doing 3 damage because of the extra 1 for the hit. But the building will absorb 2 of that, leaving 1 point to get through. 1 point is enough to injure them if it was a PC. However, as an NPC, it's going to suppress them and make them prone. So back to the Marauder at this end. He's only got 1 round left in the magazine, so he's going to fire it at a rate of 1. So for that, he's going to use his normal dice, which are the 2 8s, dropped by 1 because of the range to the 8 and the 6, and 1 ammunition dice. Now the rules aren't clear if you have to roll ammunition dice. I'm going to have to look that one up. Single shot weapon, you wouldn't necessarily be doing it, but we'll assume you can for this. So he's got 1 hit and he's used up all the ammunition. If you exceed the number of rounds left, you remove the dice, but it does still count if you're down to your last dice. So he's actually got the hit with normal damage. So where has he hit Sergeant Rain? He's hit him in the leg, so unfortunately that's gone into the building wall and done nothing. And he now uses his action to remove the suppression. Now I'm going to assume he's actually ducked back because that, if you're going prone, you're going to be dropping into cover. So we're into the next round in Sergeant Rain. So Sergeant Rain has got 13 rounds in the magazine, so he needs to be careful with this one. So he's going to fire down at this guy, or is he? It would make sense to have that guy there. So what he's actually going to do, he's going to go into Overwatch, which means he's ready to fire if a target appears. Now in reality he's not going to, because he's going to spend the action probably getting up, but we'll see what we do in a minute. So down this end we have our Marauder, who is now going to try and reload his weapon. So he's using his base skill for that, which is an 8-sided dice, and we'll give him the 8-sided dice for the skill. It doesn't actually specify, but I think that would be realistic. So does he reload as a fast action? No, it's a slow action. So he's only now got a fast action left. So what's he going to do with his fast action? There's not a lot he can do. He can't crawl or anything like that, because that's a slow action. He's basically going to stay where he is, reloading his weapon. So he has now got his second magazine up. So the Marauder we've got here, he's going to get to his feet, because it's not the best place to be there. So standing up, okay, I'm just checking if that's a slow or a fast action, and it's a fast action, so he can get up, and he's still got his slow action left. He's going to fire. However, Sergeant Rain has got the drop on him because he's expecting this. So he's on the 10 and the 12, no modifier for the range, and he's got 16 rounds in the magazine, so he can afford to fire with 3 dice. He really wants to take this guy out. So let's see what we get. Okay, so that's 12 rounds of ammunition used up, leaving him 1 round in the magazine. But he's got a 12 and an 8 and a 6. He's got 3 hits. Where has he hit the guy? 4. He's hit him in the torso, which is protected by the building, armor value 2. So let's work it out. We've got our initial base damage of 2, but we had 4 successes, so that's 3 more than we need, doing 5 damage. We get 2 points deducted for going through the wall, leaving 3. Now that means that's a critical hit. So under the fast play rules, he's now dead. Okay, that was well worth it from Sergeant Rain. So we now have the last Marauder. It's his action. So it's not, because we finished the round. That was Sergeant Rain on Overwatch. So we now start the next round. Sergeant Rain is going to reload. So again, we're using the 12-sided dice, and we'll assume an 8 for the skill for this. And he succeeds. So Sergeant Rain is now on to his last full magazine, although he's got a 16-round magazine left. The Marauder has just seen his second buddy killed, and at this point, I think if I was that Marauder, I think it's time to get out of there. So he uses the slow action fast action to get up, and he's got the slow action so he can move, and he uses that to retreat. So overview then, Sergeant Rain has taken some slight damage. He's gone down to 5 hits, but he has now incapacitated 2 Marauders. Whether they're dead or just incapacitated is up to the referee, and it's a chance for him to loot. He may well decide, having used just under a magazine and a half, so nearly half his ammunition, that it might be worth picking up one of the AKs and carrying that, because he is going to start running short of ammo. Ammunition is quite a precious resource in this. Hopefully you found that useful. That was all done live, so there were no fudged rolls or anything, and it did still show most of the things I think I wanted to show. I'll probably start doing some bigger videos where we'll start looking at adding vehicles and things in. If I have made a mistake, and it's entirely possible because that's the first time I've actually run a combat through, if you spot anything, please let me know, and I'll then make a note of it in the description. See you soon for another review.